I'm sort of like the dentist. You don't want to see somebody like me until you have to, until
Uh,
something hurts. And that's maybe what finally prompts the first phone call to our office is something's finally hurting, or there's a disagreement, or something is nagging me, and I lay awake at night. Finally, they're willing to come talk to an advisor. But I think the other problem is most likely that they're afraid of being sold a product or a service that they don't need necessarily. And there's a real risk of that depending on the individual. I think you need to make sure that if you need financial planning, that that's what you're buying, not somebody selling a product to you. And
right.
so those kind of things I think are what keep people away. But I can tell you this, and this is really one of the most beautiful things about my job, is because we do see it as a human business. I see it that way because I'm told that. I've had clients very tearfully at my desk tell me, "Do you know, Jeremy, we were this close to divorce. We were this close because of money worries and stresses. You saved our marriage with what the work we do." And that it gives me chills to think about that because I love the fact that we can offer something that's far more than just invest in this account and get this rate of return, and that kind of stuff is great. But we're saying to you, your child can go to college debt free. Your grandchild can be helped with this. Your retirement goals can be met. We need to do these things to achieve it. And I think that gives people peace of mind.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Jeremy Torgerson, financial advisor, retirement planner, and someone who brings a very human approach to financial planning. What I appreciated right away when I met Jeremy was that he didn't only focus on the numbers, he understood that retirement was about identity, purpose, relationships, fear, flexibility, and the very real question of what happens when life doesn't go according to plan. Today, we're talking about the financial side of retirement transition, as well as the emotional and practical side, too. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
It's a great pleasure, and thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Good to have you here. So let's just jump right into the questions and tell me a little bit about how you got started in the financial planning world.
Well, it kind of came about before the Great Recession, before the big 2008 change that everyone is familiar with. My wife and I were small business owners, and we were, plowing away at three retail locations with about 65 to 70 employees, I think, at our peak. And we just really had difficulty figuring out sometimes why were we taking home less than we were paying in taxes? And we had a bookkeeper and an accountant and a lawyer and things like that we were expecting, but we didn't have a financial planner, especially one versed in small business and things like that. And I started having to do my own research to figure out, things about retirement planning for us, about business succession planning, all of these kinds of things. And I began to realize that everybody that I knew that was a small business owner too, everybody at a chamber of commerce meeting was largely in the same boat, that it wasn't there's not a clear cut path for people. We're just out trying to make a living. We're out trying to do our thing. And the financial world sort of stayed behind a cloud, even with professionals that we were paying to provide us with some of that advice. So, in the course of doing a lot of my own research, I began to realize, man, there's just a huge number of people that could benefit from that knowledge. And if we ever got the chance to sell our businesses or get out of our businesses, I know what I want to do with my life. And so we did get the chance to do so during the 2008 the market crash. We owned two of the three buildings that our businesses were in, and we got offers on the buildings, and that gave us an opportunity to switch out of it. So I looked around for a firm to train me. I started originally with Edward Jones Investments, and you can't really just like take a license exam and then hang a shingle and go into business. It really is, in this business, especially maybe more than most, an apprenticeship. You never really feel like you know what you're doing for quite a while, even if you do, but you don't have that confidence yet. So you start with a firm and they do a lot of really structured training and get you going. And that firm relocated me from Colorado, where our practice is today, all the way down to deep South Texas. And that's where my practice was originally, very close to Brownsville and South Padre Island, where SpaceX has now moved to. But it wasn't there at the time.
Uh,
And we began to I originally thought that we were going to be working with several small businesses and retirees, most likely, which is kind of what the business model for Edward Jones was. And we ended up at a place where we had a large gap in financial savvy and financial education in general. It's a very, very poor area of the country. And it's mostly because we just don't have, there was just not that kind of resource available for most of the folks there. So I really began to see that we could do more than just work with fellow small business owners, which was my original intention, but that we could do very, very good work, not even just for retirees, but for pre retirees to get their families ready as well. And so now our focus is on not just getting you through retirement with dignity, those kind of things, but we're now trying also to elevate the conversation for the family as a whole, so that we can try to create generational wealth going forward with our clients. So we just decided we would create a very different kind of firm. That it would be happy to work with a small business owner. It'd be happy to work with a very, very wealthy, high net worth client, which we have many of, but it would also never, ever close its doors on a young family just getting started, or somebody who had to start again after something, in life. And so we don't have account minimums. We don't work on commission here. We just work directly for our clients as a full legal fiduciary firm. And we decided long before COVID made it an issue that we could do this even virtually, so that our working families, or people who are still, professionals who might have a difficult time getting out to a meeting with me during the day, could
Yeah.
still work with us. So we became virtual as early as 2017. So yeah, in many ways, I would say um, different in approach. We try very hard to make it a human business. It's very easy to forget what it's like to be on the other side of the table from somebody like me. And so we don't speak English anymore in this business. I speak what I call financial ease. And we have to make sure that we're getting the information through, and also listening, really listening, because sometimes there are things that you want your money to do, but you don't know quite how to say it to a guy like me. And so we have to be very good active listeners to figure out, I think you mean this. I think you mean this is what you value. Is that right? So we really take hopefully a very client centric approach to doing this.
Yeah, it sounds like it, with taking different people at different stages of their financial journey. You have to be able to pivot and be able to have those conversations. Tell
Mhm.
me about what you enjoy about, like, working with all different types of people, and especially, as they lead up to retirement.
Oh, man, I've learned a lot. It's very interesting, I will tell you, to have a practice, because many advisors try to specialize, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like if you drill down and say, I'm going to work mostly with doctors because that's the group of people I know really well, or something like that, that's perfectly fine. And I thought I was going to specialize with basically small business owners, mom and pop shops up to maybe 100 employees, that kind of thing. What I ended up learning instead, though, was that I think the biggest overall thing was that there's philosophy involved in this, and there's psychology involved in this at a much higher level than I originally thought. You're right that you said at the beginning of your intro that it's not just about numbers. It's not just about accounts or money. You're correct. Absolutely right. It is more about the way we think. And that is true about whether we have abundance, or we are struggling with a start over situation, or we're just getting started. How we view money and what purpose that money serves in our life is actually the most telling thing. And I have seen, because I've been able to work with very, very, debt debt loaded or cash strapped young families, all the way to my oldest client's 94, and he's a millionaire. My second oldest is 88, and he's a multimillionaire. So we've got like this wide range of people, and it's been allowed me to see not just different the way that wealthy versus not wealthy view money, but also generationally how we view money differently as well, and maybe also how we've learned from our parents money skills or lack of, and how that's translating down through the chain. So I think I just have a breadth of experience that makes it's easier for me to see places where we can be of help, because we have such a wide range of clients, and we can see patterns of behavior in certain groups. And then we can tailor solutions to help meet those specific needs.
Got it. So, with your experience, you said some people struggle with financial planning. What have you seen as far as where people have made either some mistakes, or where they maybe were ill prepared to make decisions?
Biggest mistake people make is just not doing it. until much later in life than they should. I used to give seminars in person. Now it's all webinars, so I can't get people to raise their hands too easy in a crowd. But I used to ask people in the crowd when we had different age ranges. I'd say, "How many of you are over 65?" And we'd have people raise their hand, and I'd say, "Now, how many of you would turn to one of the young people in the room and say, 'Boy, I wish I had started saving later in life?'" And they'll get a joke, laugh, and then I'll say, or this one, "Boy, I wish I had saved less money." And, again, the chuckle. And then I say, "See, guys, this is really important that we use the knowledge of experience and turn around and tell the younger generation, you need to start earlier than you think. You need to be organized about it. You need to be not afraid to ask questions and delve into it." It's funny that I'll give you a couple of other statistics that, things that I've learned about over the average age of someone who approaches us finally in our practice is 48. That's and they're usually still dealing with debt, student loans, mortgage, those kind of the kids' college, money. And now we're dealing with a kind of a generation issue where we may have to help elderly parents as well as adult children. Like there's that kind of weird sandwich kind of gap we've got going on right now. But also in my practice, 70% of the first appointments are actually scheduled by women. They're not scheduled by the husband or the male. And they usually have to drag the husband in kicking and screaming because the husband wants to kind of be more of a do-it-yourselfer and, that kind of attitude, which is really, um, I guess that's the nice way of just saying that he doesn't view that he doesn't have the same concerns of that she does. And actually, that's one of the other things that I found fascinating was many times with a married couple, we are now addressing questions and fears and concerns about the future that they may have been married for 25, 30 years. I've been married 32 years to my wife already, that we may never have even talked about ever in all of those years of being together. What do you fear? What is your future going to feel like at, a Tuesday afternoon at 4 while you and I are sitting here giving a podcast when we're both 75 years old in the future? Where do you live? What is your day like? Are you traveling? Are you seeing, family elsewhere? Are you staying home? Are you pursuing a second career? Those questions are things that I don't think we give ourselves permission earlier in life to think about. I think life just keeps getting in the way, and sometimes what's urgent is not what's important. And a financial advisor has to help you understand that yes, I understand there's immediate important things to worry about, and that's part of planning. But there's a long-term view that we need to take that I'm trained to do, and I can kind of keep us on track while you're dealing with those last couple of years of work and how do we get Social Security and Medicare. All of those are important questions and technical questions. But more importantly is what kind of life do you envision? What do you want out of the rest of your life? And let's make sure that your money and your financial situation can be partnered with those goals and actually help support them. So financial planning, I think, is something that people tend to avoid because they think it's going to be complex or I don't know, just burdensome maybe. I used to joke and say that I'm sort of like the dentist. You don't want to see somebody like me until you have to, until
Uh-huh.
something hurts. And that's maybe what finally prompts the first phone call to our office is something's finally hurting or there's a disagreement or something is nagging me and I lay awake at night. Finally, they're willing to come talk to an advisor. But I think the other problem is most likely that they're afraid of being sold a product or a service that they don't need necessarily. And there's a real risk of that depending on the individual. I think you need to make sure that if you need financial planning, that's what you're buying, not somebody selling a product to you. And
Right.
so those kind of things I think are what keep people away. But I can tell you this, and this is really one of the most beautiful things about my job is because we do see it as a human business. I see it that way because I'm told that. I've had clients very tearfully at my desk tell me, "Do you know, Jeremy, we were this close to divorce. We were this close because of money worries and stresses. You saved our marriage with
Wow.
what the work we do." And that gives me chills to think about that because I love the fact that we can offer something that's far more than just invest in this account and get this rate of return and that kind of stuff is great. But we're saying to you, your child can go to college debt free. Your grandchild can be helped with this. Your
Mm.
your marriage, your retirement goals can be met. We need to do these things to achieve it. And I think that gives people peace of mind.
Mhm.
Certainly, my pursuit in financial planning is that at the end of the day, I want two things for you in life: choices and dignity. And that's what I want your future to be. So we're looking, if I can figure out and get you to talk through until we've got clear goals. My job is to step back and say, number one, are they realistic with where we are today and what
Mhm.
we can do to meet those goals? But number two is, if they are realistic, how do we get there? That's not the client's responsibility when you go to a financial planner. That's our job to help you figure out the steps. And then we walk them together. It should be hopefully not a one and done, here's your report. Thank you very much.
Right.
It should be a relationship where I say, okay, we've laid out the path. Now let's go together. And
Right.
that's what we do here.
I want to go back to the difference between men and women. You can give an example like of where a spouses had different ideas of retirement, or they had different viewpoints of how to approach retirement. Can you speak a little bit about that? And then there's another question as far as that you brought up about, you know, things that are unplanned that come up.
Well, yeah, we'll definitely that's a will be a key part of what we can talk about for sure. I think, when you've got a husband and wife sitting in front of you, uh, it can be as simple as, I want to fish and play golf. And she says, no, we're going to see the grandkids in the other state. Like there can be a little bit of those kind of disagreements about daily activities, or maybe we're going to sell the family home and downsize to a condo. Like those are technical and practical discussions. But I think the bigger things that I've noticed over the years, and again, it's difficult to paint with an extremely broad brush because there are obviously always exceptions to every rule. But in my experience, again, I think it is because this is why 70% of our appointments are scheduled by the ladies, is that women tend to be generally need oriented when they come in. There is a urgent, pressing need, and I can't rest. I can't get it out of my mind. I need to solve this. Men tend to compartmentalize better, and women are integrated fully. Like if you're at work as a woman and you've got a sick child at home, you're thinking about both issues, and then probably what do we have to have for dinner. Men sort of can group that into blocks and forget they're even married for 2 hours a day, something like that. But men, when I get in front of that kind of couple, sometimes the wife is very fervent that she really wants to get this financial planning done because the debt concerns her, or the fact that we don't have enough in emergency savings bothers her greatly. The husband seems to be able oftentimes to go, we'll just deal with it when the problem comes up. But I'm really focused on wanting to buy my boat when I retire, something like that. So men tend to be goal oriented, where women tend to be need oriented. And sometimes we have to say, look, we can accomplish both. That's what a plan should do: address the needs and let you dream about the goals at the same time. So I think there's sometimes it's just getting them together. In many instances, for me, it is that it's really strange. I wish that we men were a little bit less obstinate like this, but sometimes it takes hearing your wife's concern from the advisor before the husband goes, oh, I never understood it until now. And
Oh,
so just those kinds of things that we have to kind of stitch together: needs and hopes and dreams, and also fears. Fears, financial fears are a really big part of why people approach me. I'm really worried that, I saw my parents struggle at the end, or I saw how much long-term care took out of my parents' savings until they were gone. I'm very worried about those things. Those worries are valid and they can be addressed if you get going early enough. And that's why we would tell people to get in here before you're ready to retire in 2 months. We need to look these things over much more clearly. You asked me a second question about, phrase that to me again, how you would like me to answer that one for you.
well, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit as far as as people go through life, it doesn't go as planned. That's one thing I deal with as far as when people come to me, they're like, I planned it to be fishing and to seeing grandkids, and a healthcare diagnosis comes up, and I'm not traveling and I'm not doing all the things that I said I was going to do. So tell me a little bit
Absolutely.
about that as far as how you approach like when people have to pivot or change some of their goals as far as their plan and heading into retirement.
Yeah, I would think the first thing I would tell somebody, especially someone nearing a retirement age, is there's no way that we've lived this long and not already experienced when life doesn't seem fair. And that's an important thing to remember is that my philosophy personally is life is not fair. It doesn't care if you win or lose. It's impartial to your success or failure. It doesn't, it's nothing, it's not out to get you, but it's not going to help you either. We need to pay the price for the things we want in life in full and upfront. And that's the first approach that I take is that we can have pretty much whatever future we want if we lay the groundwork and walk the steps to get there. But that effort has to be on our shoulders. So that's one thing that I would, challenge our clients that we don't want to be magical thinkers, that it's all just going to work out okay. Sort of like when my son got married 7 years ago, their anniversary, 7-year anniversary is coming up. And I told them that life is not marriage, for example, is not, you hope that you find the storybook story of happily ever after and just birds chirping and Bambi comes in the kitchen and, all those wonderful things. The truth is that what you're looking for in a partner is someone who's going to go through the tough stuff in life with you. And that's a different thing than you hope it goes well. But and then by the way, right after they got married, COVID hit and they lost their jobs. And so they were newlyweds. He got back the Monday morning from his honeymoon and lost his job. And so that's the beginning of that marriage. And and we've had the same thing. 8 years ago, my family and I were in a very, very serious car accident. They had to cut the roof off our car to get my grandmother and I out. Thankfully, we all survived, and we all are still, we're all still here kicking. But did I expect that I would have 3 spots of brain bleeding and be in the ICU for a week? No. And that's not fair, but that's life. And life is a matter of that. So when we approach financial planning, we set our course for where we want to go. But just like maybe you might see a hurricane stirring out in the Gulf of Mexico, and they always plot the line where they're pretty sure that storm is headed. And then they open this cone of uncertainty around that storm. And the further out you go, the wider that cone gets because it could drift off course a little bit. I think we approach financial planning the same way, that we set our course. We say, this is our ideal, this is perfect. And I always give 2 rules for that. You can change it. Okay. It's not static, fixed forever. We can modify it. And if something knocks us off course, we give ourselves permission to adjust the goal, adjust the drift, whatever we need to do to get that back on course. It is not something where if it doesn't go exactly to plan, we failed somehow. Okay. We tell our clients a lot that let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. A good financial plan that we are aggressively working toward will encounter some potholes along the way. Okay. When I lived in South Texas near the coast, we used to describe it as sort of like sailing, that retirement is an island over there. We know where it's at, sort of. And we know we're going to get there. And here's how the little motorboat we're going to use to get there. That's called our IRA account and our 401k at work and our pension, et cetera. But it's in a fog. We don't know exactly.
Right.
We know it's there, but it's sort of nebulous and we'll get there eventually. And so what financial planning should do is lift the fog so that you can see not just the actual goal and what that looks like, but are there rocky shoals along the way? Are you going to run aground before you get there? Those kinds of questions that can now be addressed once we decide to make clear expectations, clear goals, and set course. Now, if the weather gets rough, we have to adjust. You trim the sails, you do whatever. Just using that analogy alone is a fairly good one for the navigation toward retirement in life. But I think the planning process needs to be where we set realistic and fairly firm goals with the understanding that life might get in the way. And that's okay if it does. So I think the biggest thing we have to do is forgive ourselves of the feeling that it should be perfect. We're never going to get perfect. And that's a real problem. We're never going to get perfect. We can get close. It's that old saying, if you shoot, aim for the moon, and if you miss, you hit the stars kind of approach, right? So that kind of approach is what we would take with planning as well. I'm going to help you. Most clients don't have very, very clear goals of what they want. They might say, well, I'd like to retire when I'm 65 or 64 or something like that. And I'll say, let's pick a date. like an actual date. We can pin it on the calendar. Now I can work backwards from that number of days. I can count the number of paychecks you're going to have between now and then. Now let's look at our debt. How are we going to get our debt resolved? How we're going to, and we'll look those things through. And then we'll say, by the way, we build protections, contingencies, emergency plans into retirement because there are things that sometimes will go wrong. We're experiencing right now an increasing number of layoffs in the country along with corporate bankruptcies. So you might be 52 years old. I have a client in his early 50s, very, very highly educated man in human resources, laid off in October, still can't find work. He's having to pull a little bit out of the IRA account right now in order to make ends meet 10 years before he expected to, right?
Yeah.
He is feeling that enormous stress. And I'm telling him, we have the time to recover. Let's get your family solvent. You got to not, your full-time job needs to be not worrying about money. It needs to be finding a job. And so we'll take those little hits and then we'll come marching back and we'll take those hits. And there are times maybe where I know you and I in our first conversation prior to the podcast talked about people that might not have ever thought that they would still have adult children at home, or might not ever thought they'd have an elderly parent that they're now having to help finance.
Right.
That's life. That's life. And
Yeah.
so we don't, a good plan is flexible as well as it is clear and specific, but it needs to be flexible and we need to build in some what ifs. And in fact, one of the things we do with our software is we build a retirement plan as best we can. And then from a financial perspective, because I can't really predict the life events too well, but we can say, well, what if inflation is higher than you think? What if healthcare costs go way high? What if there's a recession 2 years before you retire? Those things we can kind of simulate. And so they recall to those in this business Monte Carlo simulations. But what we do is we build your plan as best we can. And then I will throw 1,000 what if scenarios at it and see how many times your plan fails. And then we know, okay, no matter what I could do to this thing, 90% of the time we came out okay or
Yeah.
more. 9 times out of 10, 95 out of 100 times we did okay. That's when you guys as clients would tell me, okay, I'm satisfied with that. We can't predict every single thing, but when we threw everything we could throw at it, I'm
Right.
still okay 95% of the time. I'm good. That
Right.
kind of approach is something that we do as well. So should be part of a good financial plan, is not just, set course, but what if? What
Yeah.
if? Let's prepare for some what ifs. And I have
Right.
to sometimes make the uncomfortable conversation, by the way, of saying, the guy says, I want to play golf, this kind of thing. What if you're disabled at work before you retire? What if your health declines in a way you didn't expect? And what if you need a nursing home before you're 90 years old? And I have to sometimes add in some what ifs so those uncomfortable conversations can be had, so that we can do things like protect their assets early, or come up with a contingent strategy for that as well. So it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of them thinking about their what ifs and also us giving back some what ifs and then testing the plan against those eventualities.
Yeah. And from your perspective, like what are some of the emotional concerns that come up alongside financial planning in those conversations?
Let me share a real personal thing with you. I have a client. I love him dearly. He's been a good friend of mine for many years. His health is poor. He's not even fully retired yet. He's not even 65 yet. Just found a mass on his spine, and they did a biopsy. And I don't even yet know what that result is. But he called that day from the hospital to tell me that he was there. The only thing that was on his mind is, if something happens to me, is my wife going to be okay? And he needed to hear from me, because we also manage the investments. We don't just do the planning. Um, is she going to be okay? And I said, yes, that we will. Yes, she'll be fine, because
Hmm.
she's under our care, and we had you both on course, and nothing will change that. So sometimes they need that kind of assurance. But I think the bigger emotional concerns that I see in retirement in general is a few things like that. There's some of that. I'm concerned about my spouse or children after I'm gone. That's a pretty common one. So estate planning is part of that conversation as well. Biggest one by far is, I'm afraid I'm going to run out of money before I'm gone. And so that's something that we look at very carefully. Um, and then I think the other thing that I notice most is when they actually do retire, there is a profound loss in many instances of purpose that they didn't expect. that all of a sudden you were in a professional environment, you're credentialed or whatever, and you're working with colleagues, and all of a sudden they go, "Hey, great, it's been wonderful, thank you very much," and you exit that building, and now the world feels very strange, and I don't feel like I have a home anymore or purpose. I think that's the biggest thing that my retired clients tend to find themselves in completely unexpectedly, that I suddenly need to find something to do. And I don't want to, again, paint with too broad a brush, because I think it will happen to both men and women, especially now in the last several decades when women are been as professional and as career oriented as men. But I think
Uh-huh.
there's a tendency for the wives to be like my wife would tell you this: well, women's work is never done, no matter what. If I retire, I'm still cleaning up after you, Jeremy. And like that kind of thing. I think I see two ways with men that really surprise me. And I've been around in the business long enough to see it happen over and over again. If a man retires and grabs the rocking chair or sits down in the lazy boy, he doesn't live very long after retirement. That he really needs to be, not only have a purpose and a reason to get up in the morning, but I think men need to stay physically active for their health's sake. But the ones who do, like I said, my second oldest client is 88 and still, very, very wealthy man. He's still farming and still
Uh-huh.
throwing bales of hay and still staying active and having his purpose. So I think we tend to now say, when we talk with folks about retirement, it's not when do you grab the rocking chair, but I really want people to start thinking about, when do we want to make work optional? And that approach is, I think, like, now we can stop doing what we had to do to pay the bills. Now, what do
Mhm.
you want to do? Do you
Right.
want to take up a second career? Do you want to start a business of some sort? Take your expertise and consult. Do
Mhm.
something like that. Maybe you just want to volunteer your time in a cause that you care greatly about. Find
Yeah.
something. So I think that's the biggest part of retirement planning that is maybe forgotten by a lot of advisors is, yes, we got your money figured out. Yes, we got your monthly expenses dealt with. What about your purpose? And what
Mhm.
about what's going to get you up and keep you alive and keep you excited every day? And those kind of conversations should be had with your advisor as well.
Yeah. Because a lot of people still wanna have impact, and they have impact on their families and their communities, but sometimes they need a bridge and structure, because there's a lot of structure with
Mhm.
work and
Mhm.
inherent in and
Yes,
of itself.
absolutely. Absolutely. The more institutionalized, the more we identified with the work, the bigger that loss is, I think. And I think that's where seniors have really got to say, you have agency. You could be so profoundly impactful. Volunteer at a school, go to an animal shelter. There's so many things you can do, and there's so much experience. That life experience cannot be duplicated. Write your book, like, do those kinds of things to get those, use that experience that you've tread through life. And like I've sometimes said, like, we've traveled a distance. If you're a certain age, I'm 54, so I'm still a baby compared to some of your viewers maybe. But we now have the experience to turn back and tell a younger family, because we've navigated through the landmine of life, and we can say, don't step there. Don't step there. Because we did, and that kind of thing. So you have the ability to be a mentor, if nothing else, into the future. I really do think that's an important part of it. We live much longer than a few generations ago. When Social Security was created in the 30s, the retirement age was still 65, and the average man died at 72, and the average woman died at 76. So there wasn't a whole lot of retirement time. You worked and worked and worked and worked, retired, and you were gone fairly shortly after that. That's not the case anymore. We're living to our mid to late 80s and 90s, and we still sometimes have vibrant, good agency all the way to most of that distance. My next door neighbor is 93, lives alone. He's a widower, still perfectly functional, gets out, does his own yard work, drives to church, like all of those things. He's still doing it. He doesn't need that care. He found a reason to be here. And he volunteers his time, and he's visiting with friends, and he's enjoying his family as much as he can. Like, there's tremendous value still after retirement, but you have to decide, how do I want to give my value back? I do think that's probably a good view for retired folks, is to look back and say, now let me give back to the younger people the wealth of my experience, and in some capacity, whatever. And I think that provides tremendous wealth. I think you'd be surprised, by the way, because I have clients all the way down into their 20s, guys. You would be surprised how many of those young people are looking for that life guidance from elder people. You'd be very surprised how receptive they are to that advice.
Well, the one statistic that I always refer to is that 11,400 people are turning 65 every day
Mhm,
in the
mhm.
United States,
Yep.
right? And that's going to
Yes.
continue on till through 2027.
Yeah,
And
that's correct.
it's not so much that we lose them from their jobs, let's say if they retire at 65, but we also lose that wealth of experience,
Absolutely, without question, without
right?
question. Yep.
And especially now in navigating uncertain times and some of the things that you've lived through,
Mhm.
that you're able to then have experience of navigating your own life and helping other people navigate.
Yep.
Those are the gaps that we're starting to realize. So I believe that it's it's our plight to give back, especially to the generation now that is so different and sees work as different, to then help them navigate and keep themselves, yet do the work that they're expected to do.
Yeah, the younger generation, I can tell you, your audience really believes that the world is different now and far less fair than it was when even I was their age, let alone someone much older. And I think that's something that is helpful to hear. I mean, we don't want to be didactic. You don't want to be condescending to that group, but you do want to say to them, no, it really wasn't. You ought to see what the Great Depression was like, or the recession of the 1970s that lasted 12 years, or, like there are lots of things we've all experienced that we can say to them, actually, I do understand you. And I think that's where right now the generations don't think they understand each other. They okay, boomer, like the younger people will say those kind of things. And I'm this weird, cynical Gen Xer in the middle that looks at both sides and says, you guys sit down, go watch Star Wars. And but no, that generational conflict, I think, is just because the two generations tend to talk past each other instead of at each other. And so, Ben, and I like that I have clients on both ends, far ends of the age spectrum. And so we can actually see that what they're worried about, what a 25-year-old is worried about, is very similar to what a 55-year-old is worried about, which is very similar to what a 75 is worried about. And they all think we don't have a shared experience we can collaborate from and learn from. We do.
Okay. Excellent. Well said. And for someone listening today, whether they're years from retirement or, just starting to plan, what's one good piece of advice that you would want them to remember from this conversation?
For younger people, I would say that you think you're too young to worry about it. It's very hard for younger people to imagine being 65 or 75 years old. It's hard for them to imagine being 50, let alone older than that. So, we know that there will be more pressing concerns that they may have. Maybe they're still trying to buy their first home or start their family or finish school, whatever their concerns are. Those other goals out there, though, those other buoys, markers of life, mile markers in life are still there. And I think that we need to help them understand that, yes, we understand that your primary concern will be your short-term goals, and we're going to help you with that. Your long-term goals, though, I have to really keep in on the radar as best we can. So I tell young people, you today are not my client. My client is you when you are 75. And I have to protect my client from you because you are going to make terrible mistakes that are going to hurt my client. And
Uh,
so we have to really watch that and protect that. I think as you approach retirement, then I think that's when the seriousness shows up, because again, the average age that shows up to us is 48. But there is usually a mess. And there's an embarrassment at that age that I should be further along. I didn't save, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have to get over the whole, there's no shame. There's no shame. And let's start from where you are. Life is not about a perfect past. It is about where you are today and going forward. That's what we can do. So we have to tell people there's no judgment. I don't really, basically I tell them there's nothing you could throw on my desk that would surprise me. I've seen everything. So bring it. There's no judgment, but we need honesty. And now I need you to be vulnerable so that I can tell you the things you need to hear, not just the things you want to hear. That's important at this age. And then as you get into retirement, I would say, let's think about two things. Do you have the choices you want? And do you have the dignity you were after? And let's work toward those two things as well. And by the way, dignity doesn't just mean enough wealth to do what you want. It means, do I have the purpose of life? Do I have the respect of my, community? Those things, we can still be of value, guys, when we're retired. And so I think that's really important to make sure is, do we have a sense of self-respect, self-worth, in addition to financial net worth? And that's an important thing that I think we would work at that age. And then we have to do the uncomfortable talking about, how do we leave what's left behind to your family? How do we take care of that? How do we protect the estate from taxes? Those are more practical type of discussions. What if you need the nursing home? They're going to bankrupt you to do it. Like let's think those things through carefully. But every stage of life has a unique moment of, aha, I want a financial plan to help me with this. And at different points, we just focus a little bit differently. It's like a telescope where I'm looking close or I'm looking far away,
Hmm.
depending on who you are. But no, I think the biggest thing is the relationship. Let me finish with this then. The relationship with your advisor should be personal enough that you can be vulnerable. And it's meant to be, not a transactional relationship. If it is, that's really disappointing, because sometimes my clients don't know what they want, and it takes conversations to figure out, what do you value? Or sometimes maybe a family's dynamic changes radically. My son got divorced and I don't want to deal, like those kinds of things can become a real problem. And so it should be that the advisor and the client go hand in hand together toward the
Right.
future that we set today. And if they don't have that relationship, that's something that, uh, I would hope that I wouldn't just toss the plan across the desk at you and say, go with God. You know what I mean? Like, saying thank you very much for the check you wrote. I would hope that we would say, now here's the plan. Here's the 11 steps we need to do right now. Now let's start. Let's
Got
begin
it.
and walk with you to get them done. And I think that's the biggest concern we would have. I did see many times that if you give somebody a report, it's overwhelming, it's burdensome, it'll shut them down. They'll go throw it in the file drawer and they won't touch it. 3 years later, it comes by, we're 3 years older, 3 years closer to retirement or whatever the goal is, and we didn't implement it. So a good financial planner should be, yes, let's lay out the roadmap, but now I'm going to help you walk it. And as your coach and as your advisor and as the loving nag in your life, I'm going to get behind you and swiftly kick you in the backside when you need it, to make sure that you're getting toward the goal that you want to achieve. My job is to say, if you can achieve it, come on, let's go. And I will lead from the front as best we can.
Got it. I love that. That's a great place to end. If someone wants to learn more about how to connect with you, or what how to work with you, how would that happen?
The best way is, we are registered in several states around Colorado, but we can work with clients anywhere in the US under what's called a de minimis rule. So don't worry about where you're located. We actually have clients all over the country. But I would go to www.investadvisors.com. It's the letter N, vest, not the word invest. Just take the I off the front. But investadvisors.com will tell you a little bit about us. Our booking calendar's right there. What we always want to do first when somebody wants an appointment is we don't really have an agenda to start with. I just need to hear from you and visit with you. And that is to see, kind of give me some basics about what's going on, what's prompting you to finally make this phone call or have this appointment. Because again, I'm the dentist. You don't want to be here unless you have to. So something is bothering you. So let's find out what that is. And then it's my job as a legal fiduciary to say, is this relationship going to be in your best interest? I'm legally required to make that determination. And if it's not, we'll give you some resources and send you on your way. If it is, we will then begin to work deeper, and that's up to you. So we work on that. There's no consultation fee. There's no commitment. Just communicate. Let's make sure that we like each other, so that 5 years from now, when I call you on your phone and you see it's me, you're not going, oh God, what's that guy calling me for? But instead you say, hey, Jeremy, I haven't talked to you in a couple months. What's going on? That's the kind of relationship we want to have with our clients, is where it becomes so intimate over time that it's important to make sure that we're going to be aligned philosophically, that we understand directionally where you're headed, and we can think that we can achieve it for you. If we can't, there's no point in even beginning that relationship. So the first meeting is let's just chit chat. Let's just visit. and see if we feel like a good fit or not.
Yeah, that's good. And in every relationship, that's probably where we should start, right?
Absolutely. Like I say, you don't propose marriage on the first date.
No. So thank you so much for your perspective on the financial side of it, and then also the perspective on the emotional side, and what people can kind of do to start preparing for the emotional transition.
It's terribly
Mm.
important work, to do
So
this. I don't, as you can tell by my personality, I don't take myself all that seriously, but the work is so important to get right. And again, not perfect, but get it right and think it through and then execute. And if we don't do those things, I promise people the next 5 years will be exactly like the last 5 years unless we make a change. And so
yeah,
we need, and we'll just be 5 years older. So yeah, that's the important part of it. And I really appreciate the chance. So I'm so grateful that you reached out to our small family firm and said, Jeremy, let me talk to you. And I said, I'm here, let's talk. So no, I very much appreciate it. And I hope that your viewers had at least a good understanding and from the conversation about some of the ways that I, as an advisor, look out at them and see the challenges that they may not even be aware is coming. And
yeah.
I think that's important.
And for anyone listening, if this gave you something to think about, share it with somebody that's preparing to retire or maybe already has retired and is kind of now asking like, what else should I do? And until next time, remember, retirement isn't the end of your purpose. It's an opportunity to renew it. So we'll see you on the next episode.